Welcome back to Four Winds Field. Well, there are many factors that can impact a baseball game. The weather factors, wind and rain, are pretty obvious. Temperature, especially if you're a fan or a player. But what if I told you the ball will fly farther on a muggy day than on a dry day? Because the air is lighter. What's the best weather for hitting a home run? The long ball. You might think on a dry, crisp day where the air seems kind of thin, that'd be really easy for a baseball to be hit out of the park. But you'd be wrong. It's actually the hot and humid days, the mugginess, that allows that ball to go a lot farther. Now, all things being the same, temperature on the same, the wind speed the same on a day, the humidity has a much bigger factor on if the ball will be leaving the park or not. And it's because muggy air is actually lighter than dry air. We'll explain. So all this comes down to what's in the air that we live in here on Earth. Nitrogen, that makes up the most of our atmosphere, 78%. Oxygen, 21%. Everything else, just 1%. And there's one big variable, water vapor. We see it in the clouds. We see it in the rain we have. It can vary from near zero up near the Arctic to near 5% in the very, very tropical equatorial regions of the Earth. So you might remember this from chemistry class. You may be learning this eventually in chemistry class, but all the elements have unique properties. Hydrogen, our lightest element on the periodic table, has an atomic weight of 1. Nitrogen, a little heavier than that, with an atomic weight of 14, and oxygen, heavier than that, with an atomic weight around 16. You can see it highlighted here on the periodic table. So the air we breathe, we're pretty familiar with this, okay? Nitrogen is heavy. Oxygen is even heavier. This is what we breathe. And then there's water, H2O. You may know it as well. That's 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogen. It is much, much lighter than oxygen and nitrogen molecules. So if we have the same volume of air, but one is dry, just full with all nitrogen and oxygen atoms, and the other full of nitrogen, oxygen, and water atoms. Same space. The only difference here is that water is taking up some of this space and not more oxygen and nitrogen molecules. It's lighter. There are lighter elements in this volume. So on a muggy day, the air is actually lighter than on a very dry day. You may think of a riddle, famous riddle. What's heavier, a ton of feathers or a ton of bricks? The answer is they weigh the same, but it's a lot easier to move through a ton of feathers because it's less dense. That's why a baseball is easier to hit out of the park on a muggy day.
That's so interesting. Tom, you're so smart.
I feel like I'm back in science class.
I was okay at baseball. I was a lot better at science. Today, the wind blowing out, but if it is hot and humid, you want those outfield seats with the wind blowing out because a home run is more likely.
Some great information. Thanks, Tom.